So today I wanted to share with you 6 saints who are proof that you can be restless and redeemed. That being broken doesn't have to be a barrier to being holy. And from each of them, just share a little bit of, I think, the gift that they offer us of how we can live well in our human person. So our first saint is Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton. So she was born in 1774 in Northern America, and she's actually the first person born in what is now the United States who was canonized. So she's got a horror story. Her mum died when she was 3, and then just after that, the baby that she died in childbirth with also died. So she lost her mum and her sister at the age of 3. Her father then remarried and had a bunch of kids, but then that marriage broke down. So then she had to live through that divorce, live through the rejection by her stepmother. And she got married young, and her husband's business went completely bankrupt, so they had to leave their house. But by this point, they'd also taken on, as well as her own kids, taken on her husband's 4 younger children. So they've got all these children and they had to move house. And we know from her writings that she had this huge inner darkness, that she had all this grief from her time as a young person. She was suicidal at 16. But the thing is, we're not just talking about her story of brokenness, we're talking about her story of being redeemed. And so the thing that she found solace in was, going to the seaside and reading books and spending time in nature. She loved playing piano, like music, nature, poetry. So our advice that I think we can gain from Lizzie Ann is make your world bigger. Sit by the sea, under a tree, spend time in creation. Read poetry, listen to and play music. Seek the things that will lift you out of your internal conflict. And when we make our world bigger, somehow our load becomes a little easier to bear. So our second saint is a guy by the name of Saint Benedict Joseph Labor. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but so he was born in 1748, and he is known as the patron saint of the homeless. His story is wild, and I love it. So he felt this, deep call to be living a consecrated life, and he would go to, one congregation and say, I'm ready to join. And they would say, oh, you're too young, buddy. And then he'd go to another congregation, they say, you don't have enough recommendations. To another, and they said, you don't study well, you're never going to learn Latin well enough. And go to another congregation, and they'll say, you're not fit for communal living. He went to another congregation, and they said he was too delicate. He tried it just about every congregation there was in Spain and France, I think. And he got knocked back time and time again, rejection after rejection. And he found that he wasn't able to express himself clearly, that he was often misunderstood. So at some point, his pursuit of trying to find another congregation that would take him in ended. And he ended up just living as a homeless beggar, effectively, living a life on the streets. And somehow this guy is a saint, right? It's wild. That even his confessor from his later years would talk about how unhygienic he was and how he had to protect himself from the vermin on this young homeless guy that was coming to give his confession. He was always eager to share what he had with the others around him. He ended up dying from malnutrition and exhaustion in his 30s as a homeless pilgrim. But within a few years of his death, there was hundreds and hundreds of cases of miracles that had happened in account of his intercession. And I find his story so inspiring because he really didn't have much. From all accounts, he wasn't a particularly easy person to get along with. He didn't have a particular amount of eloquence or anything to offer. He couldn't even do communal living, right? But somehow he's a saint. And I think his advice to us would be something like this. Advice from Benny Joe. Take every day what God gives you and offer it all back to him. This is the joy of life. Even if all you have is half your mind, half your health, give it all back to him. You don't have to understand what's going on or why it's happening to choose to love God and others. He really teaches us that what we have is gift, but we have a choice with what we do with that gift. So our next saint is Saint Jane Frances de Chantal. She was born in 1572, pretty sure in France. And she's known for founding a congregation that allowed women to join that had been rejected by other orders. And she didn't have an easy life. Her mother died when she was 1. She got married and then her first 2 children died. She took on her sister's kids when her sister died. She was widowed at 28 with 4 kids. And she struggled, in her interior self. She struggled with temptation, with anguish, with scruples, with hurry, anxiety of mind. And she kind of knew that she was struggling and that she couldn't do it all by herself. And she ended up having St. Francis de Sales as her spiritual director. And I think there's so much wisdom for us in this very act of knowing that you can't do it alone, knowing that you need someone else on the journey with you. It's good to have perspective, to have a voice of wisdom, of reason, of truth come in, because we can get so tangled up in ourselves, right? So I think our advice from Jane Frankie would be seek someone you can talk to about the important things of life. Someone who's wise, who will listen, who will save you from getting lost inside yourself. So our 4th saint is Saint John of God. So he was born in 1495, and he's well known for inspiring the St. John of God hospitals. His origin story is wild. They don't really know what happened, but they know that he disappeared at the age of 8, that he ended up in a different country to where his parents were. And during the time that he was gone, his mother died of grief and his father became a Franciscan. So even years later, when he ended up making his way back to his home country, he realized that he had no roots there, that his parents had kind of given up on any hope of finding him. So here's this 8-year-old boy in a foreign country, doesn't speak the language, orphaned, living on the streets. And so somehow through this life of living on the streets, he ended up becoming a soldier. And then he was in charge of a big section when a whole bunch of the loot was stolen and he was sentenced to death. But someone intervenes and he escapes that. So he did not have an easy life at all. And then he's into his 40s by the time he realizes that he's lived his life as a soldier without, really living out any of his faith, and he's quite anguished by that. And then a little bit further down the track, he has this mental breakdown at the age of 42, and he ends up institutionalized as a madman in a psych hospital effectively. And he starts ministering to the other people that are in the hospital. He starts finding peace in serving, in not being consumed by what's going on in him, but thinking about the needs of other people. And it's inspired this, whole movement in the healthcare profession, the St. John of God hospitals. Like, I'm sure there was a point in there where he felt like he was going crazy, right? But he found peace. And I think we can gain a lot of wisdom from his source of peace, that he was really restless, but he found redemption. He was really broken, but he found a path to holiness. And so some advice I think that we can get from Johnny. When we focus on ourselves, we can get tangled in all kinds of unhelpful webs. Peace is found rather in lovingly serving those in need. Unwind your mind by using your body's strength to tend to those in need. So our next saint, number 5, is one of our MGL patrons, quite a well-known saint, Saint Teresa of Lisieux. So she was born in 1873, and she's known for her practical spirituality, the little way. But she struggled too, right? Her mother died when she was 4, and she characterizes, from 4 to 14 effectively in her life, this really dark, grief-stricken time when they say she was so serious. It seems at every point of her life she was struggling with something. If it wasn't grief, it was tantrums or being highly sensitive, being consumed by seriousness. They say that she began to hide within herself, that she didn't want to be seen during that time of grief, that she was in constant need of encouragement and affirmation and things like that as she was waiting for growth into her full humanity. And then her sister, who would become pretty much her second mother, had then, joined Carmel. And so she lost her sister, so she had a new grief arise. And she found right through, but especially in her time in Carmel, that, she had these great desires of her heart, but her mind wasn't capable, her character wasn't capable, her body wasn't always capable of meeting them. That she wasn't always able to pray as she wanted to. She felt incomplete in being able to meet the desires of her heart. And then in the last 18 months of her life, she experienced this great inner doubt, this darkness of faith, of even believing and hoping and trusting in Jesus. And so some advice that I think that we can gain from St. Therese, little Tess, is pray as you can, not as you can't. And it turns out that's all God really wants anyway. That sometimes we can feel like we've got something and we're unfulfilled until we do the perfect thing, say the perfect prayer, hit the perfect rhythm or structure. But it's just a great reminder to us to offer what you can, pray as you can, not as you can't. Now, saint number 6 is another MGL patron, another well-known saint, Saint Ignatius of Loyola. He was born in 1491, and he's known for founding the Jesuits and for his spiritual exercises. So Ignatius was the youngest of 13 children, and honestly, sometimes I think that showed. He lived this really boisterous, low nobility kind of life. He was born into the petty wars of minor nobility, and he lived a frivolous life, a womanizer, taking everything that he could from life, effectively. And part of that was, going out and bravely being a soldier, going off to war, winning, young maidens' hearts, that kind of thing. But on one of these expeditions, he was hit in the leg by a cannonball deflection, and his leg was shattered. And his military career's over, everything that he hoped for, and he's also a pretty vain guy. And so suddenly one of his legs is shorter and a little bit, twisted, and so he's like, re-break it. I want to get a longer leg, I can't be like this. So his sense of everything he was on about was kind of shattered, and he spends this time, in one point dreaming about, this lovely royal lady that he's going to swoon, everything he's going to do for the king in the king's good service. And on the other hand, all he's got to read as he's waiting for his body to heal is these books about the life of Jesus and the saints. And he thinks that's pretty boring, but he reads it. And when he's in these throes of his imagination, he's so caught up in it. But he finds that afterwards, he's feeling a little bit dry, desolate. Kind of like doesn't ring with the same resonance as when he's reading the lives of the saints, imitation of Christ. He's feeling, there's something here. Like, even if it's not in the reading afterwards, he starts to burn. And from there, we get the whole premise of the spiritual exercises of discernment, of discerning what's happening within us. And he starts to realize that his emotions don't tell the whole story. And we get this beautiful gift from Ignatius from that, of the examen, of being able to look at what's happening in an experience, in a moment, in a situation, and being able to find God in that. And I think that is a huge gift for any of us who struggle mentally, that, it doesn't matter what's happening in my mind or in my heart, there is something objective, and that is the love of God. And I'm always able to be part of that story. So some advice I think that Iggy might have for us is, you don't have to be captive to the ups and downs of life. Get to know the voice of God by doing a daily examen. Listen to him every day, and you'll learn the rules of discernment. This will help you make a good decision beyond the flight of your emotions or the confusion of your mind. That feeling frazzled or foggy or feeling high or low doesn't have to impact our path of holiness. In fact, it can be part of our path to holiness if we know how to find God in the midst of it. So there you go. 6 saints that are proof that you can be struggling with things in your life. That doesn't have to be a barrier to finding your path to holiness. In fact, it might be the very thing that helps you get there.